Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Mr. Robot video, where I talk about the possibilities of where is Elliot at the end of Season 4, Episode 11. So first off, should go without saying, this video contains spoilers for Mr. Robot up to the very end of Episode 11 of Season 4. If you haven't seen up to this point, you should not be watching this video. Otherwise, I'm going to spoil the hell out of you. Anyway, so I did my review for this episode, and that's not what this video is. I'm not really here to talk about the episode and what happened to it. I'm here to talk about that ending of this episode. Now, we only have I guess 5 or so days until we find out the answer to this, but I decided to go on here and speculate and run through all the possibilities as well, because I've gotten a lot of feedback on my video, which was a lot more popular than I thought it would be, and I got tons and tons of different theories of what actually happened at the end of that episode, because of course if you saw the episode, you have to, if you didn't, you shouldn't be watching this. But Elliot confronts White Rose at the Washington Township plant where her project is, and she implies that she's going to use it. She mentions something about parallel worlds, and this has been mentioned in the show in the past. There's been a lot of hints dropped about time travel and parallel universes and whatnot in this project. There's been a lot of mention of this, and Angela, of course, was shown something by White Rose that made her think that she could bring her mother back. And White Rose says to Elliot, I'm going to show you what I showed Angela. And then apparently, she shoots herself, and then the plant, melts down, and everything fades to red, and then we get this 20-minute or so sequence of a different version of Elliot living this perfect life. He's the CEO, runner of Allsafe, trying to land the big thing with F Corp, with its CEO, Tyrell Wellick, who's dressed in casual clothes and looks very casual and talks about what's the worst thing in your life. And Elliot, of course, is all dressed all nice, and he's very outgoing, and he's going to marry Angela, and he has a good relationship with his father, and he's a lonely child, and all this. So what the hell is going on? There's a lot of speculation. So there's 3 major theories I'm going to look at in this video, and a lot of variation within those 3 theories. I know there's probably even more, because I've seen so much speculation rolling around on the interwebs here. But I'm just going to look at these 3 major theories, because I think these are the sort of 3 most likely scenarios in my mind. And first, so to name the 3, first of all, is we take this episode at face value, and this is a parallel universe. Second one, this is all inside Elliot's head. It's some kind of delusion, hallucination, dream, or whatever you want to call it. And third is that Elliot is dead, and this is some sort of afterlife. Or perhaps he's about to die, and this is the vision he gets right before he dies. The variation of he's dead. So, I'm going to explore those 3 possibilities. Now, there's also this thing about a possibility of this being a simulation, but I don't really consider that option viable. So, maybe that's a variation of in his head thing, but I don't know. Maybe I'll touch on that when I get to this in his head, but there's some sort of matrix. I don't know. I actually didn't hear that from feedback on my video. That's some other podcasts and videos were mentioning that, but on my video I mainly got, because I was talking in my review of this episode, that it's basically a parallel universe, but there could be other possible explanations. I got tons of feedback where it seems like almost the majority of people think that it's not a parallel universe, that it's either in his head is the most common theory, or maybe it's a death sequence or whatever. So anyway, let me look at these 3 possibilities. First, let's start with the parallel universe one. Now, this would be the one if we take the show at face value, because this is what the show is implying most heavily, because of all the the talk about White Rose's project has always been connected to something sci-fi, be it time travel, parallel worlds, or whatever. The biggest hint that we got dropped was that in season 3, the whole season opened where we went to Washington Township and we saw a bunch of scientists and they were talking about the possibility of parallel worlds, and then it zoomed out and it showed that machine, which a lot of the later marketing and everything and flashbacks and previous on really imply that that machine we saw was White Rose's project in question. And so it's implied the scientists who were talking about parallel worlds are connected to this project. And then, of course, in season 2, White Rose, or Minister Zhang, in her Minister Zhang form, was talking to Dom, and she brought up parallel worlds and that possibility. And then, of course, throughout season 3, we got a lot of hints about undoing things. Like Angela's totally convinced like she can undo and bring her mother back and stuff like that after meeting with White Rose, which, by the way, was in a very similar fashion to which White Rose met with Elliot in this episode. So, and, of course, the biggest one in this episode, very episode itself, as I mentioned earlier, White Rose even brought up the possibility of a parallel universe, or parallel worlds, or sort of changing the world to be something better than it is, and mentioned the term parallel universe or parallel worlds. Can't remember exactly, but she did mention that. So this to me would seem like the face value. If we take the show at face value, this is a parallel universe. Now, I do think, my personal opinion, I think a lot of people are shying away from this theory because they don't want the show to go too sci-fi. Me personally, I don't have any issues with the show going this sci-fi, but that's not really here or there as far as discussing this possibility. But here, anyway, so there was all that build up, and that's why I think most people, like myself and other reviewers, kind of took it at face value that this was a parallel universe, because that's what the show has been telling us. So if it's not, I'm still very open to the possibility that it's not a parallel universe, a parallel world, or anything along those lines, that it is in fact in Elliot's head or something of the sort. But if that is the case, I think they need to explain it. They need to explain some things away. First of all, White Rose's project. Because the fact that, Angela is so convinced by this meeting with White Rose that she could bring her mother back and that there was something. In fact, we got a scene in season 3 where Angela was talking to Irving. And she asked Irving if she thought that White Rose could really pull it off, and Irving brought up the sandwich and the rib sandwich, and that cavemen thousands of years ago would think that it would be impossible to pull something like that off. And so he is this roundabout way to say anything is possible with an advanced technology. And it gets back to this common saying that Arthur C. Clarke said that super advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic for those who were not as advanced. But anyway, so all these things lead me to think that it is definitely in the realm of possibility. And in fact, my personal opinion, I do believe this is the most likely scenario, because I think this is an Occam's razor situation where the show has been telling us over and over and over again that this is a parallel universe. So sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. But then again, the show is also known for trying to trick us, such as the prison sequence, which I'll get to shortly. and so it's also in the realm of possibility that this is another fake out. I will admit that. That's definitely in the realm of possibility. My personal opinion now, I think this is more of an Occam's razor situation. And Elliot somehow is transported to a parallel universe. Now, there's all different variations of this, like how exactly is that happening? Is it just Elliot who's gone into the parallel world, or is it just the people who died in the show who's gone to the parallel world? Because most of the main characters we see in this alternate sequence, whatever you want to call it, are dead. If we assume that Elliot died in the meltdown, then he's dead. Angela's dead. His father's dead. Her mother's dead. Tyrell Wellick is dead. White Rose is dead because she shot herself. And they talk about Angela's father, which is implied could be Price, and he's dead. And Darlene is alive and well, and she's not in this other world. And so, but there's a few people who worked at Allsafe with, like Ollie and that other dude we haven't seen since season 1. Now, we don't know for a fact that they're not dead. Like, maybe they were in one of those E-Corps buildings that blew up in season 3. Maybe they are dead. But that sort of brings up questions about this parallel universe that only people who died get to go to it. But then again, I'm kind of touching on the third theory here, so I'm thinking I might gonna skip ahead. This video is very disorganized, but anyway, I might skip ahead and talk about the third theory, that Elliot's dead, because the fact that you have all these dead people here could lead to the theory that this is some sort of afterlife. That he's having that he died, and he's having this vision where he's meeting up in what he imagines himself to be the perfect life, and he meets up with a lot of other people who are also dead, and they sort of try to hash out the mistakes of their lives together. The time they spent alive, and they sort of meet up and hash out their mistakes. Now, the biggest issue I have with this theory is not that it's whether or not it's possible, but if they did this theory, I really wouldn't like it, or I don't think I would. I mean, who knows? They could always pull something off, because it sounds too much like the ending of Lost. Now, I'll give spoiler warnings for Lost if you haven't seen it. I just spoiled it for you anyway, but whatever. Most people know about this ending anyway. It's a bit. And Lost ending was not good. So Lost, basically in its final season, presented a parallel universe, or what appeared to be a parallel universe, but in fact it was an afterlife, and it's where all the main characters got to meet and sort of meet up. It was kind of more like a purgatory, because they got to meet up, reunite, and then move on to the actual afterlife together. Yeah, and I don't think that was a good ending at all. I think that was really cheap and horrible, so I'd hate to think that and I do think if this is some form of afterlife, that it would be, even if they pulled it off better than Lost did, it would be too similar, in my opinion. And I don't think that's a very good gag. So if in fact it does turn out the case that there's only dead people in this alternate world, I would prefer that it was a parallel universe, but in order to go to the parallel universe, you have to die first, which might explain why White Rose shot herself. Because she knew that, although she would have died in the meltdown anyway, so I don't know. She just wanted to be dramatic. But that is an interesting thought. That we don't know if Ollie and that other dude are actually alive. We haven't seen anyone who's confirmed to be alive, like Darlene or Dom, or Leon. So, that's, or Irving for that matter. So, so far we mainly just saw dead people. So that's something to consider. Now, since I'm jumping all over the place, let me talk about this second theory, which is the most prominent one I've seen. I almost feel like the majority of people are sold on this theory. This is all in Elliot's head. Now, there is of course, as I said with the parallel universe, there was a lot of stuff to back this up, but there's also a lot of things to back up the in his head theory, because we've gotten repeatedly scenes that do take place in his head, such as the boardroom scene, where we see a version of his mother and his younger self, and a version of his father, who we call Mr. Robot, all meet up constantly and talk, but it's all taking place inside his mind. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that this is inside his mind. And also, there's been this talk about another personality, like the other they refer to, that's been dormant apparently. And so a lot of people theorize that this alternate Elliot that we get, who some people call Perfect Elliot, who has, the sweater vests and perfect life, and he's the CEO of All Safe, and he's marrying Angela, that this is in fact the other. And so this is taking place all inside his mind. And some people brought up the prison sequence in season 2 to showcase that the show has done this before. That it's not outside of the realm of possibility, where the show presents us with something and makes us think it's one thing, but it actually turns out to be another. However, in the case of the prison, that I think that analogy is slightly off kilter and doesn't completely fit here, because in the case of the prison, which of course was presented to us like he was just living at his mother's house, but we find out it was just a prison, Elliot never thought he was at his mother's house. He was lying to his friend, i.e. the viewer, us, about where he was. He knew full well the entire time that he was in there. He made this clear to Chris. So it's just like, you're not at your mother's house, right? He's like, yeah, I know. Like, he knew it. And in fact, he even said, I was lying to you. I'm sorry, I apologize. I was lying to you. So, the show, the one time where the show did present us with one situation and turned out to be something entirely different, Elliot was aware of this in the universe. And so I don't think Elliot is aware that he's not in this alternate world, although we have to wait till next episode. We haven't really seen him interact. But I would find it hard to believe that he's lying to us again. And therefore, if he's not lying to us and he thinks that he's in this parallel world, then it's not the same thing as the prison, is it? Because in that case, Elliot knew exactly where he was. So this would be something totally different. Now, that doesn't bring it outside of the realm of possibility. I'm not saying because of that this definitely is not going to happen. Still in the realm of possibility for sure. But it would be something totally different in the prison. Therefore, bringing up the prison doesn't really help back it up that much, because it's kind of a different situation. Now, another really strong point, that if this is all in Elliot's head, to me, if they do that, they need to explain all of this setup that they have for White Rose. As I said, there's all this, like Angela's talking to Irving, the scientists at the power plant, White Rose repeatedly, like the Grant right before he died, she was convinced, I will meet you again. And then she, in this episode, she said that, everyone who died will come back. She completely believes that she can bring people back. And so it seems like she's 100% on board with this parallel world. So if she's totally wrong and Elliot just so happens to go inside his head into something that she was talking about, I think they need to explain that. Because if it was just like, oh no, she's just crazy, she's just wrong the whole time, that kind of doesn't make sense why Angela believed that. It doesn't make sense why everyone around her believed that, why Irving bought into that, why she was like, why she has this huge project and it just turns out to be a dud, but Elliot goes into his head to a world that's exactly the same. That's too much of a coincidence. In fact, that's what I really didn't like about the ending of Lost. So I would hate it if Mr. Robot went that same route, because Lost, had they set up this atomic bomb so that they could create a timeline where the plane never crashed, and then we see a timeline where the plane never crashed, but it just happens to be an afterlife that has nothing to do with setting off the bomb, which to me is way too coincidental to be ineffective. It's too contrived. It's too contrived writing. It's too obvious that there's some writers behind this trying to fake us out, and I actually have more faith in the writers of Mr. Robot, especially after learning the mistakes of Lost, of seeing that, because it's already been out, to make that same mistake of it just being a coincidence that this thing inside of it has just so much just so happens to be exactly what White Rose has been, and they've been hinting at repeatedly, so heavily since season 2. Now, as I said, there's variations of that. There's a way they could get around this, and that is the theory that White Rose put this inside his head, which would fit with what he said about, I'm going to show you the same thing I showed Angela. So it's possible he showed Angela a version of this parallel universe, a vision, almost like a computer simulation or a pill or something like that inside her head that showed her inside the parallel universe, but she wasn't actually there. And it could be she's doing the same thing to Elliot, that she actually, but if this is the case, it would have had to happen before she shot herself, so that it would have to be part of the simulation. So it could maybe even be like before Elliot even stepped into that room. Maybe when we see Elliot stepping into the room where he meets White Rose, this is where the simulation begins, and everything henceforth is part of something inside his head. And this is different than the Matrix theory that I talked about earlier, because that's positing that White Rose is putting everyone under and making them think they're in a parallel universe, like they're attached to the Matrix. And that, I'm sorry. I don't give that any merit whatsoever. But just me personally. But if it's a simulation just in Elliot's head, that I buy. That I think is a lot more plausible. But it would be White Rose showing, this is what I can do. This is what my machine can do. And this is a sample, if you will, of this other world. I do believe that is possible. I think, to me, that's the only way the all inside your head theory works. But that doesn't really work to the perfect Elliot being the other, though. It gets really confusing when you add that. So I kind of am shying away from that. But to be clear, like, I am open to any possibility, because I have so much faith in the show. In fact, the more I think about this last episode, the more I love it. So I have faith in the show that whatever direction they go with, it could be anything, even the Matrix one, whatever they do, I'm sure they'll pull it off and make it work for the character, which is the only important thing. So I'm still open to this. I just personally would shy away from it. Yeah. Basically. And, okay, so I heard some other variations on this. I heard this theory that the perfect Elliot, as they call him, the one we see at the end of this episode, is the real Elliot, and the entire show 4 seasons before this was just a hallucination of him imagining himself being this, because he lives a normal life, as he says in this episode. He talks to Tyrell, saying that he gets up every day and it's the best and worst thing about his life, that is pretty average, just routine, going to work and doing the same things. And so he is imagining that he's this clandestine hacker who has this off-the-wall sister and is able to be involved in this huge world-changing adventure, and it's just, that's all the dream inside his head. To me, that's even worse than the Matrix theory. This, to me, would be the worst possible scenario. In fact, I don't see, if they did go this route, I don't think there's any possible way they can make it good. Because what it really sums up to, what it adds up to, is essentially the entire show was just a dream. Which is the worst kind of ending. Like, it's all in the snow globe. Like, that was done for last. So it's the worst kind of ending that any show could possibly have, to say the entire, what you spent your life on, was just a dream sequence. So I personally don't give that theory much merit at all, and I super hope that they don't go that way. And I have more faith in the showrunners to not do something an ending that's such a cheat and undermines everything. And that kind of goes along with, even if this is a parallel universe, which again I'm still sticking with as the most likely. that even if it is a parallel universe, I think the show's not going to end by everything being undone, like White Rose's plan sticking, and that all of the events that happen throughout the show are just wiped out. I really have more faith in them to do that. I think that this is going to matter. I think what we've seen happen in the real world is going to stick, but that's just my feelings. As I said, I still have a lot of faith that whatever direction they go in, they're going to pull it off, because I was super impressed. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. You may have different thoughts. Maybe you disagree with some of my reasoning here. Maybe you have other reasonings. I'd love to hear about it in the comments section below, so make sure to let me know. And of course, I will be back in just a few days to see how wrong I was and to see where we're actually going in this finale. Which, if there's one thing I hope I get right, is that this finale is going to be awesome. That's the only thing I'm really hoping that I get right. A parallel universe, death, simulation, whatever. The only thing I really want to get right is that this finale is going to be amazing, and that is my biggest theory here. Anyway, that is it for this video. Be sure to check out my reviews for Mr. Robot coming up, as well as I cover other shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.